You'd think owning a peaceful lake cabin would be the reward for years of hard work, right? That dream was exactly what Rachel and I were chasing when we bought our cozy waterfront retreat. What we didn't anticipate was that our dream came bundled with a living, breathing nightmare. Victoria Albright, the self-proclaimed queen of HOA enforcement. She wasn't just any HOA Karen. This woman ran her neighborhood like a dictatorship dressed in designer suits and lemon-sucking frowns. What followed was a battle of authority, assumptions, and the most ironic 911 call you've ever heard. The cabin was everything we dreamed of. Crystal clear water shimmered like glass, tall pine trees whispered in the wind, and the only sound was the occasional splash from birds diving into the lake. The sunsets were postcard perfect, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that reflected off the water surface. Each morning, we'd wake up to mist rising off the lake, creating an ethereal landscape that reminded us why we'd worked so hard to get here. After 15 exhausting years in the city, we were finally free. Rachel had just landed a major promotion, well earned after climbing through enough bureaucratic messes to qualify for sainthood, and I was doing great with remote software consulting. The promotion meant more responsibility, sure, but also the flexibility to work from our lakeside paradise 3 days a week. Life felt peaceful for once. We were clueless. Danger was lurking 3 doors down, hiding behind HOA bylaws and an insatiable hunger for control. The kind of danger that doesn't come with warning signs or emergency broadcasts, just passive-aggressive notes and clipboard-wielding inspections. Our first encounter with Victoria should have tipped us off. She ran the HOA meetings with the intensity of a courtroom judge and the warmth of a DMV at 4:59 p.m. The community center where meetings were held might as well have been her personal throne room, with residents sitting in uncomfortable folding chairs while she perched at an elevated table, peering down through reading glasses that never quite made it to the bridge of her nose. Rachel, wearing ripped jeans and a faded band tee, got the look. You know, that laser stare from someone who's been offended by your very existence. Victoria's eyes narrowed, her lips pursed into what can only be described as a mathematical point, and her posture stiffened even more than I thought humanly possible. "Welcome to the community," Victoria cooed, voice dripping with honey-coated venom. "I trust you've read the standards. All 347 pages." She pronounced standards like it was a sacred text handed down by the gods of proper lawn maintenance. Her eyes didn't blink. I half expected her to hand out citations for our choice of footwear. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees during that interaction alone. We smiled politely, not realizing those 347 pages were less community guideline, more psychological warfare manual. Later that night, we skimmed through the binder sheet presented us. Rules for everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the precise angle at which holiday decorations could be displayed. There was even a section about appropriate lake viewing demeanor, whatever that means. The next week, I noticed Victoria standing at the edge of our property, squinting at our deck furniture and making notes. When she saw me watching, she simply smiled and waved with all the warmth of a cobra. Trouble began when I installed a simple rope swing on the oak tree by the water. It wasn't anything fancy, just a thick rope with a wooden seat that I'd handcrafted myself. Rachel had laughed with joy the first time she swung out over the lake, splashing into the water with childlike abandon. For a moment, it felt like we'd achieved exactly what we'd been working toward all these years. The next day, we found an HOA violation slip taped to our door with surgical precision. Unapproved installation of recreational equipment. It was a swing, not a Ferris wheel. The citation included a demand for immediate removal and a $150 fine. The document was signed with Victoria's name in a flowing script that somehow managed to look both elegant and threatening. Rachel muttered something about tyranny and constitutional rights as she crumpled the notice. I installed a birdhouse the next day, purely to test boundaries. It was a small, tasteful cedar house that matched our cabin's aesthetic perfectly. It got flagged within 24 hours for unauthorized architecture. I'm not kidding. The violation notice referred to the birdhouse as an auxiliary structure lacking proper dimension clearance. At this point, I knew we weren't just living near Victoria. We were under surveillance. I started noticing her Lexus slowly cruising by our property at odd hours. Once, I caught her using a measuring tape at the edge of our lawn, presumably checking grass height against her sacred standards. Rachel began documenting everything. The lawyer in her knew that paper trails matter. We installed security cameras, within HOA guidelines, of course, and started building our own dossier. Game recognizes game, Victoria. But nothing prepared us for what happened next. It was a warm afternoon in late spring. The lake was particularly beautiful that day, with gentle ripples catching the sunlight like thousands of tiny diamonds. Rachel was sitting peacefully by the lake, sipping lemonade, minding her own business. She'd had a stressful morning video conference and needed some quiet time before diving back into work. I was inside trying to fix the Wi-Fi, classic remote work life, when I heard sirens. SR, ENS, not the distant kind that make you briefly look up from your phone, but the right outside your door kind that make your stomach drop. I ran out and saw Victoria standing next to two bewildered police officers. Her posture was triumphant, arms crossed over her chest, chin tilted upward like she'd just captured a dangerous fugitive. She was pointing at Rachel like she'd caught her committing grand theft kayak. "She's trespassing," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the water and probably scaring every fish within a mile radius. "She doesn't belong here. She's defying HOA security ordinances." Victoria's face had turned an alarming shade of red, veins visibly pulsing at her temples. Rachel stood up slowly, calm and composed. She didn't raise her voice or make any sudden movements. She simply said, "Officer, you might want to check your chain of command." Her voice was steady, professional, with just a hint of amusement. The cops looked confused until Rachel pulled out her badge. Asterisk State Police. Chief of Command. Asterisk the badge caught the sunlight, gleaming with authority that outshone Victoria's HOA power trip by several orders of magnitude. Let me tell you, nothing wipes the smug off of Karen's face faster than realizing she just tried to get the state police chief arrested for sitting on her own property. Victoria's expression shifted from righteous indignation to dawning horror in the span of about 2 seconds. It was like watching someone realize they just tried to give a parking ticket to the mayor. The officers, who apparently hadn't been told exactly why they were being called to our address, looked mortified. One of them actually removed his hat in respect when he realized who Rachel was. They apologized profusely, explaining that they'd received a call about suspicious activity at our address. You'd think Victoria would have at least tried to apologize. Nope. She disappeared for 3 days, presumably retreating to her inner HOA bunker to draft more unreasonable lawn maintenance laws. Not a word, not a note, not even a passive-aggressive email. Complete radio silence. But the best part? Turns out, Rachel's promotion hadn't just landed her a big title. She was now overseeing all regional enforcement partnerships, including oversight of community enforcement officers, aka HOA security staff. The very people Karen reported her to. In technical terms, Victoria had just tried to sick the dogs on their own master. Now that's karma. The kind that doesn't just knock on your door, it kicks it down wearing steel-toed boots. Word spread quickly around the lake community. Neighbors we hadn't even met, yet started stopping by with welcome baskets and stories of their own Victoria encounters. One couple brought us a bottle of wine with a custom label that read, HOA Survivors Blend. Another neighbor confessed that Victoria had once measured the height of her children's sandbox with a professional grade level. We didn't seek revenge, but we did start enjoying ourselves a little more loudly. We hosted a peaceful protest pool party with floats shaped like police badges. The entire lake community showed up, except for one notable absence from 3 doors down. I built a second swing, and a third, each one meticulously documented and submitted for approval through proper channels. Channels that Rachel now happened to oversee. Rachel started using a megaphone to read aloud HOA violations backward. It became a Sunday tradition. Neighbors would bring lawn chairs and popcorn to watch the performance. The neighbors loved it. Turns out, we weren't the only ones sick of Victoria's rule. One elderly gentleman told us he hadn't felt brave enough to replace his mailbox for 7 years, despite it being partially crushed by a snowplow. The community began to change. People started painting their doors in colors other than the approved shades of beige. Children's laughter returned to the lakefront. Someone installed a community hammock that quickly became the neighborhood's favorite gathering spot. At the next HOA meeting, attendance was at an all-time high. Rachel showed up in full uniform, not to intimidate, but simply because she'd come directly from work. Victoria's usual commanding seat remained conspicuously empty for 20 minutes. When she finally appeared, she was wearing jeans. Jeans! The room collectively gasped. The moral of the story? If you're going to call the cops on someone, you might want to make sure they don't outrank the cops. It's just good business sense, really. Also, don't underestimate the power of peaceful resistance, especially when it's backed by someone who signs police budgets. Sometimes the universe delivers justice with such perfect timing that all you can do is sit back, sip your lemonade, and enjoy the show. We bought a cabin for peace and found ourselves in a sitcom. But Rachel? She turned the HOA battleground into a masterclass in quiet power. And Victoria? Well, last we heard, she's been strangely quiet during meetings, especially when Rachel's in uniform. She's taken up gardening recently. Her roses are actually quite beautiful, though I'm pretty sure they exceed the recommended height by at least 2 inches. Nobody's measuring anymore. As for us, we're enjoying our lake cabin exactly as we dreamed. The swings are getting plenty of use. The birdhouses are flourishing with feathered residents. And this summer we're installing that Doc Victoria once claimed would disrupt the lake's visual harmony. Sometimes karma doesn't just come around. It moves in 3 doors down and brings reinforcements.